ينفعنا وزدنا علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت يا حي يا قيوم تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا. اللهم أعذنا من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا واصلح لنا شأننا كله لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم وبعد. قال المؤلف الإمام حجة الإسلام الغزالي رحمه الله ونفعنا به وبكم. So this section here is upon the appetites of the stomach, and how one should be moderate in their intake and avoid intake of anything which is haram. And then he's gone into a detour talking about generally what is halal and haram, and about taking wages or gifts from those who are in power, and the different opinions about that as well. Because in other words, the relationship being, is their wealth considered haram? So if anything you take from them, would it be something that is then you're taking haram, you know? So that's something we got up to really. And generally, I mean, there was difference of opinion. Some scholars were much more strict. They said you can't actually take nothing from the rulers. That was not really most people's opinion. Some people took a middle way, saying if you're poor, or some said even if you're a scholar, because then you have a certain right from the public money, you may take. But if you are rich and you don't need that, then you shouldn't take, because then you don't have that type of right for the public money in the first place. So if you were poor or someone who had a right from the public purse, then you would take it with that intention, that this is from part of what was due to me anyway. And then some said, no, you can take the money from them, even if you're rich or poor, as long as you're not sure that the actual thing that's been given to you is from haram. For example, you know, it's been usurped from somewhere or something like that. If you are sure that it's definitely from something that's been taken from someone wrongfully, if you take it from the sultan, you must return it to the person who was taken from wrongfully. And most people drew the line there, most scholars, that if the thing that is being given to you is definitely, you know, has been wrongfully taken, then you should not accept. This happened a lot in Muslim countries in the mid-20th century, where a lot of the revolutions took place and people were throwing off the old colonial rule, and countries were gaining independence. And in a lot of countries, socialist regimes came about. And in either case, a lot of land was seized by government. You know, a lot of land was taken and declared to be government property. You know, from private people, from land that was privately owned, and from awqaf as well. You know, land that had been for centuries part of awqaf, in religious endowments. According to Sharia, that land can never be taken away from that status. Once someone has put a land as a religious endowment to support a mosque or a madrasa or anything, it could be an orphanage, whatever it is, that land can never be taken away from that purpose until Yawm al-Qiyamah. But a lot of these lands were seized into and declared to be government property as well. So, you know, I remember one of my teachers, Shaykh al-Yaqubi, he was buying a house in near Damascus, outside of Damascus. And the house that he bought was on usurped land that the government had usurped and then used for these private building and everything. Now, technically, according to Sharia, if you are on usurped land, your prayer is makruh tahrimi as well, and things like that, So he went to great lengths to actually trace who were the original owners of that piece of land where the house was built on. By investigating around local villages and stuff, he found like elderly people, and they remembered, before this revolutionary thing, that they used to belong to so-and-so family or whatever. And he traced the people, and he found, the original person had died, but then he went to his inheritors, his children, etc. And he told them, look, I want to pay for that thing. And he actually paid them to get that off his thing, Which wasn't that much, because obviously just a small, the land that the house was built on, it wasn't that much that he had to pay in the end. But still, that's the sort of thing. That's wara, really,
Where
to
did
be
he
very
get it
careful.
from? So where did he get it from?
Because the houses had been built probably by I don't know who, private companies that had got it from the government, the land, bought it from them. I don't know, I'm not sure. There was a place called Qura al-Asad, which was like a whole village, not village, but it's called Qura al-Asad, very sort of modern buildings and everything. So I'm not sure. He bought it, from someone, but they were not the original people that the land had been usurped from.
So he paid for it twice.
So that's what we mean by taking from the rulers and all that. So it says, فَإِنْ قِيلَ فَمَا تَقُولُ فِي صَلَاةِ أَهْلِ السُّوقِ وَغَيْرِهِمْ. So it says, related to this, what do you say about, say, businessmen? If a businessman gives you gifts. So we said rulers, discuss that. What about business people, for example? Often you're not sure. People who have businesses, is their income halal or haram? هل يلزم ردها والبحث عنها وقد علمت مجازفتهم. If say a businessman wants to give you something, for the sake of, he might be a relative, or a friend, to increase your relationships with him, but should you then reject that gift if you're not sure? Because we all know amongst business people that they can often be like, mujazafa means like often going beyond the boundaries, of what's strictly halal and haram, bending the rules, you could say. وقلة نظرهم في معاملاتهم وكذلك صلات الإخوان. And then even your general Muslim brothers and sisters, if we say, society's become corrupt nowadays, people are corrupt, should we even accept gifts from people, brothers or sisters that give us, or should we be more careful and say, no, I don't want to risk it, it might be haram or doubtful and all these things. فالجواب أنه إذا كان ظاهر الإنسان الصلاح والستر فلا هرج عليك في قبول صلته وصدقته. So the answer is that as long as the person is outwardly a righteous person, what that means is a salah wa sitr doesn't mean he has to be a wali or something. It means he's a normal practicing person or a normal straightforward person who's not, and sitr means, he's not someone who publicly does a lot of haram. If the guy comes to you, he owns a pub or something, and that's a public thing, then obviously he's probably going to do something which is major haram. Walaikum salam.
Just a quick one on that point. Where do you draw the limit? Like, for example, Russia, they under the communism, they nationalized all the land, and as the Iron Curtain came down, so in the late or early 90s, people like Abramovich and these people, they benefited ultimately from
Yeah.
resulting in, for example, him purchasing Chelsea Football Club. Where do you draw the line in the sense that if you're going out now watching a football match, you're actually contributing, or what I'm trying to say is so endemic in the system that that club has been paid for using money that was illicitly. So
I think you shouldn't go to football matches.
no, I don't go to football matches. I'm just saying that.
No, just kidding. Yeah, no, I understand the point. I think it is difficult in the day and age because that's what the Prophet ﷺ said. You know, the time will come when people won't be able to get away from the traces of riba, you know, or traces of haram. So we live in one of those type of ages, you know. So we just have to try to do the best we can. I think later on Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah will also mention, you know, not everyone can go to the extreme wara. And actually he says later on in the chapter, if someone wanted to, even in those days, if someone wanted to get complete away from anything doubtful, they would have to go and live in a mountain, like some of the people used to do, of extreme wara, live in a mountain and just live off the sort of fruits and grass and things like that grow around. That would be the only way. And so you can imagine that was even in that time. So in our time, the same applies. But Imam al-Ghazali says, no, you know, that's not for everyone. That's not for the norm. That's for only people who go to an extreme length of wara. For most people have to do the best they can to remain within, you know, what is halal. And then, but after that, you're sort of excused as well, you know, because you have to eat and drink and live, you know. So you use that, and that's what he says, you know, we should then just make the intention that you're just getting what you need for your food, drink, nourishment, you know, and then even if it is doubtful, you're excused from that if you can't find pure halal. So that's the type of thing. So, you know, everyone just have to judge for themselves. Yeah, so he says, as long as the person is outwardly straightforward, a righteous person, then you should take. There's nothing wrong with taking any gifts that the people give you, because gifts are normally given to increase our relationship, or, you know, bring you closer to one's relatives or friends, and that's a very noble thing in the Sharia. ولا يلزم البحث بأن تقول قد فسد الزمان فإن هذا سوء الظن بذلك رجل مسلم. And he said it's not necessary for you to start saying, oh, things have got corrupt nowadays and I shouldn't accept anything from anyone. Because he said this is then you're having bad opinion of that Muslim brother or that Muslim person. So this is really a good thing that Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah has brought. Yeah, because often you find in some books you can find extreme positions in these type of regard, especially some of the books of tasawwuf. When they're exhorting you to have more wara, but then they can take you to people can misinterpret and go to an extreme position, you know, and start saying, I reject all gift from all my relatives, my friends, yeah. But then they're forgetting there's higher objectives in Sharia as well. It's a higher objective to maintain a strong relationship between your relatives and your Muslim brothers and sisters. That's a higher objective than what you're trying to do. You know, so that's why it's important. People like Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah, they're able to give you that balance, you know, where you might have conflicting, you know, you have a conflicting opinion here. You're not sure, should I accept, you know, what's more important? So these are the type of people that can guide us. بل حسن الظن بالمسلمين مأمور به. Having a good opinion of Muslims is something that is commanded for us. You know? So just to have doubts about people, it's more important to have a good opinion of a Muslim brother or sister. ثم أعلم ما هو الأصل في هذا الباب وهو أن ها هنا شيئين. So he says, then know that what is the actual foundational principle in this regard is that there are two things here. أحدهما حكم الشرع والظاهر والثاني حكم الورع وحقه. So there's two aspects here which may sometimes be conflicting. One is the hukam of the Sharia, the law, and the second is the ruling of wara, the position of wara, scrupulousness. فحكم الشرع أن تأخذ ما أتاك ممن ظاهر صلاح ولا تسأل إلا أن تتيقن أنه غصب أو حرام بعينه. So the Sharia is telling us, as long as someone is outwardly a decent person, let's say, you should take what they give you and don't ask questions unless you're sure that the thing they're giving you is something haram. Unless you're sure, with certainty. Then obviously you shouldn't take it. وحكم الورع أن لا تأخذ شيئا من أحد حتى تبحث عنه غاية البحث وتستقصي عليه غاية الاستقصاء فتستيقن أنه لا شبهة فيه بحال وإلا فترده. What does wara want from us? Scrupulousness. He says to us, don't take anything from anyone unless you're sure that it's halal. So it's like different to what the Sharia dictates. Yeah? And you should make every effort to find out, is the thing halal before accepting it from someone. Yeah? So this is like almost like two conflicting things in your head, when you're trying to decide. فلقد روينا عن أبي بكر الصديق رضي الله عنه أن غلاما له أتاه بلبن فشربه. It's narrated that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq رضي الله عنه, once one of his servants bought him some drink, yogurt. No, sorry, milk. No, yogurt, isn't it?
So milk.
Yeah, I think that's a modern usage, isn't it? It used to be.
Halib, same thing.
Yeah. Because laban nowadays they use it for, or the other way around now.
Nowadays it's yogurt.
Actually, it depends on the countries. Like we are in Iraq, we say Leban, it's yogurt, and Halib.
Yeah.
But like in Egypt, they call Leban still, they call it as Halib. So it depends the countries. But in Arabic, Leban, Halib.
I can't remember now. What was the classic usage of laban?
It's milk.
Used to be milk. Yeah, milk. So he bought him milk and he drank it. Yeah, because now they use it for yogurt, don't they? Then he said, فقال الغلام كنت إذا جئتك بشيء تسألني عنه ولم تسألني عن هذا اللبن. Then the servant, after he drank the milk, he said, whenever I bring you something, you always used to ask me where it's from, etc., the source of it. But this time you didn't ask me. فقال وما قصته. So Abu Bakr said, where is it from? What's the story? قال رقيت قوما رقى الجاهلية فأعطوني هذا فتقيأ أبو بكر وقال لهم هذه مقدرتي. Then the servant told him, I got this, I did a ruqya for some people, in the way of the Jahiliyyah, it was not in an Islamic, the way we used to do it before Islam. And they gave me this, as a payment. How do you translate ruqya?
Witchcraft.
فَتَقَيَّ Abu Bakr. So Abu Bakr then induced himself to vomit as much as he could. And he said, oh Allah, this is my ability. In other words, whatever's left, I can't do anything more than that. فَمَا بَقِيَ فِي الْأُرُوقِ فَأَنْتَ حَسْبُهُ. Whatever is still within my system, my blood system, you are the one that can take care of that, Allah. فهذا يدلك على وجوب البحث عما تقدم عليه إن كان لك النظر في الورع وحقه فهذه. So he says, this narration will show us that it is important to think about where the source of things that come to us. before we consume them. If we want to be people of wara. فإن قلت فكان الورع يخالف الشرع وحكمه. He said if someone was to say, then what do we do where here the wara goes against the shara, the wara goes against the law, which says that we should have a good opinion and just go ahead. فاعلم أن الشرع موضوع على اليسر والسماحة ولذلك قال صلى الله عليه وسلم بعثت بالحنيفية السمحة والورع موضوع على التشدد أو تشديد والاحتياج كما قيل الأمر على المتيقن أضيق من عقد 90. So Imam al-Ghazali just makes this important point here about the Sharia is based upon ease. Sharia is based upon making things easy for people. Whereas wara is the opposite. It's based on making things difficult for yourself. And this is the key difference. Wara someone should only impose upon themselves. It should not be imposed upon others. The Sharia should be imposed upon others.
Is the wara the same as taqwa?
It's similar. Similar. Yeah. And this is, where you find people going around trying to put wara upon others. This is against the teaching of the Prophet ﷺ, very strongly against the teaching of the Quran and the Sunnah. يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ. Allah wants ease for you. You can't get more of a clear statement than that, from the Quran. وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرَ. He does not want hardship for you. He doesn't want difficulty for you in this deen. Yeah? And very clearly against the Sunnah. I won't, obviously people heard about those hadith. So the Prophet ﷺ was very much making things as easy as possible for people. But wara is for your own self, to make things as difficult as possible. For yourself is good. To be as careful as possible, take the position of taqwa, to pray more nafil as possible, your sunnahs. To do all these extra things, good if you do it for yourself. But don't enforce upon others. Encourage them by all means, but don't enforce upon them. How do you translate that last sentence? كما قيل الأمر على المتيقن أضيق من عقد 90. That passage, did you? Anyone got that?
Both of these types of injunctions emanate from the same source?
No.
That's too far.
Probably before, just before that sentence, just before that.
The injunction about lawfulness or unlawfulness is known as an injunction of taking precaution about something. It's called taqwa. That one.
Yeah, that's it too. Just before that sentence you read, is that what it says just before that?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe let's skip that a little bit as well.
There's a bit of
It's not paragraph, yeah.
So I guess this applies also to like things like eating out at say restaurants or butcher shops, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess you could say the bare minimum or the Sharia point of view would probably be obviously he's a Muslim, asking him, having a good opinion of him, which is halal.
Yeah.
But then the better opinion or the more stricter would be to check certificates, suppliers, and all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. It's a good example. Often happens that say you go to restaurants and it's a Muslim and they say it's halal. Or often it'll say on the thing halal, In this case, you can accept that, from a Muslim and eat. But even in Sharia, they even say even if a non-Muslim tells you something is halal, you're allowed to eat it. But then, obviously, scholars may look at the time we live in now and say things have just become so bad and so corrupt. And people's amana has become so corrupted that these rules may not apply. So I'm not sure if it requires different fatwa now, but generally speaking, that was the idea. Yeah, that if it's someone they say it's halal, you can eat it. Now, if you're going to the restaurant, it's a Muslim, but he sells alcohol, and he says the food is halal, I personally wouldn't eat in there then, you know, because obviously then they're doing something publicly that's so haram. Why would he be scrupulous about, you know? Then you could argue about whether, you know, if you know they don't pray, for example. If you don't know, he could be someone who prays, he could be someone who doesn't pray, then fine, just, you know, you can accept. We don't have to say, oh, you know, bro, I haven't seen you at the masjid. What time is it for Dhuhr today? Just test him or something. You don't have to do anything like that, but, you know, if you know for sure, you know, they don't pray, because that's also a major sin, not praying the 5-day prayer. That would be considered, you know, fisq as well.
By the same token, though, if a non-Muslim, you accept his word, I mean, he's probably selling booze as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Maybe the hukum needs changing for the time we live in. That was back in those days. They said, you know, if you're in a if you're a Christian shop, you know, they say it's halal, you can accept that. Their outward word for it, you know. You don't have to delve. But maybe it needs changing for today's day and age. I'm not sure. But then the other thing is, but you know, should you obviously for yourself, if you want to find out is it proper halal, is it HMC approved, I should do extra research, you know, then that's good for yourself. But if you see other Muslims, let's say in your family or relative, going to that restaurant and they haven't done that extra research, we don't necessarily have to make it difficult for them, if you know what I mean. We can encourage them if we want to, but it's that type of thing, you know.
What about if it's HMC and they're serving alcohol? Obviously, you wouldn't go there.
No.
What about if they had a gambling machine?
Yeah, there as well is quite bad, isn't it? Gambling is similar to alcohol, really, in a way. In fact, mentioned in the same ayah as well, you know. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ. They ask you about alcohol and, you know, chance games, chance gambling. So you mentioned the same ayah, so it's similar, you know, in a way. They're both haram, so yeah, I wouldn't do that then. Similar, let's say something like music. You know, people who listen to music, Muslims. For you yourself, if you want to take the more position of wara, you could avoid listening to musical instruments. Yeah, because there's, you know, quite a lot, most opinions were that they're not allowed. But there have been several scholars, even from the early time, you know, until now, that have said that musical instruments are permissible. You know, as long as they're not associated, obviously, with certain types of behavior or certain types of singing that encourages, you know, immoral activities. Then they said musical instruments in themselves are permissible. So that's another example of somewhere you wouldn't necessarily make things difficult for Muslims, you know, by saying to them you can't do this, you can't do that, because there's a valid difference of opinion there. Yeah. But if you made it hard on yourself to be in a position of scrupulousness or taqwa, then that's good as well. So this is very important, you know, the difference between making things difficult for people and difficult for yourself. ثم الورع من الشرع أيضا فكلاهما في الأصل واحد. It is, but you know, the interesting thing is that wara actually comes from the Sharia. It's from the teaching of the deen. So in a way, there's no contradiction between them. They are from one source. You know, you have the Sharia and you have wara. They are from one source. ولكن للشرع حكمان حكم الجواز وحكم الأفضل والأحوط. So in the Sharia you have this thing which is permissible, and then you have the thing which is better. Yeah? So it's permissible to indulge in certain types of luxuries, let's say, but it's better to avoid those certain type of luxuries, for example. والجائز له حكم الشرع والأفضل والأحوط يقال له حكم الورع. So this is another way of looking at it. The thing which is permissible is what we call Sharia. Yeah? But then what is better, what is the better way to do things is what we call wara. You understand? فهما مع تميزهما واحد في الأصل. So these two come from the same source, which is this deen. فافهم ذلك راشدا. So this is obviously the beautiful teaching. The teaching of Islam contains within it a capacity for all types of people. You know, it's a very, very encompassing teaching. You know, the Sharia is there for everyone, every Muslim. Yeah? Because it's realistic that not every Muslim is going to strive to be from the higher levels of piety and taqwa. So the Sharia doesn't require that from every single Muslim to become a wali. You see what I mean? But then for those who want to make that extra mujahada and they want to get extra darajat in the akhirah, that is all there within the teaching, encompassed exactly what they need to do. You see, so that's the beauty of it. فإن قلت إذا جاز البحث والاستقصاء عن كل شيء فسد علينا ما نأخذه في هذا الزمان وتعذر الأمر بمرة على صاحب الورع إذ لا بد له من بلاغ يبلغه إلى الطاعة. So then he says, you know, if you were to ask me, if we want to become from the people of wara, and then we have to research into every single thing, is it halal, is there doubt in it, is it haram, this is going to be so difficult for us, especially in the time we live in. And he's talking about, you know, his time, which was 500 Hijri. You know, so you can imagine the time we live in now, as Sidi Taimur was saying, it's just going to become pretty impossible. فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ أَنَّ طَرِيقَةَ الْوَرَى شَدِيدٌ. So this is when he said, this was the point I was mentioning earlier that he's going to come to. He says to have complete wara is very difficult. It's very difficult. وَأَنَّ مَنْ قَصَدَ سَلُوكَهُ فَشَرْطُهُ أَنْ يُوَطِّنَ نَفْسَهُ وَقَلْبَهُ عَلَى احْتِمَالِ الشِّدَّةِ وَإِلَّا فَلَا يَتِمُّ لَهُ ذَلِكَ. Anyone who wants to try to take this path of complete wara, completely avoiding anything doubtful and haram, he will have to prepare himself, prepare his heart to take extreme hardships. If he doesn't do this, he will not be able to get to that station of wara. ولهذا المعنى صار الكثير من أهل الورع والسابقون إلى جبل لبنان وغيره. So this is why many of the people of wara and the people who are at the foremost of the spiritual path, they went and they lived in the mountains of Lebanon and other places. Imam al-Ghazali himself travelled through these areas in Sham. You know, as you know, in his spiritual travels, when he left his life of being a professor, etc., behind, and he went on a spiritual quest for about 10 years. He was, you know, gone by himself, wandering around, staying in places, khalwa, doing dhikr and all these things, until he then came back to teaching. During that time, he went to Sham, and he stayed studying the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus for a few years, and they still have the room there where he stayed until today. You know, you can go to the Jami' Amawi and you can see the place where he stayed. And he also stayed in Bayt al-Maqdis as well for some time in Jerusalem. So that's why he mentions here the people in the mountains of Lebanon. You know. فاقتصروا على أكل الحشيش وثمرات تافهة لا شبهة فيها بحال. These people, they went there and they ate the fruits and the grass and the vegetables that were growing around them. So they had absolutely no doubtful or haram things coming into their bodies. فمن سمت همته إلى نيل منزلة الورع الأعلى فعليه أن يحتمل الشدائد ويصبر عليها. Anyone whose aspirations, spiritual aspirations, come to that point of getting to this level of wara', the highest level, then they have to take these hardships and have complete sabr. وَيَسْلُكَ طَرِيقَ أُولَئِكَ, and he has to take the path that those people took. That's the only way to be completely 100% free of any type of doubtfulness. لِيَنَالَ مَنْزِلَتَهُ وَأَمَّا إِنْ أَقَامَ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ وَأَكَلَ مِمَّا يَتَنَاوَلُونَهُ فِي أَيْدِيهِمْ فَلْيَكُنْ عِنْدَهُ بِمَنْزِلَةِ الْمَيْتَةِ لَا يُقَدِّمُ إِلَّا عِنْدَ الضَّرُورَةِ. As for the majority of people who are still remaining amongst society and they're eating the food that people are eating, then the way to do it is to just eat what is necessary. Yeah? To make the intention that you're taking your necessary nourishment for your physical health, etc. So that in a way it's like darura, you're excused in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you can't find pure halal, then you're excused, because you still have to, it's wajib for you to eat and drink. Even like in Sharia, when you're starving, if pork is the only thing available and you're going to die if you don't eat it, you have to eat it. And if you didn't eat it and you died, you'd be sinful. It's actually wajib to eat it in that point. This is why when people say, what's the hukam of eating pork? It's not actually just haram, it's wajib as well. In certain conditions it's wajib. Don't tell most people that, they might get confused. See them next day with ham sandwich and pestos or something. ثم لا يتناول منها إلا مقدار ما يبلغه إلى الطاعة. And then so try to restrict yourself to just getting the nourishment that you need for your body. When things are doubtful, don't get excessively into them, so that you have any sort of an excuse in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فيكون له أذر في ذلك ولا يضره إن كان في أصله شبهة فإن الله تعالى أولى بالأذر ولهذا قال الحسن البصري رضي الله عنه فسد السوق فعليك بالقوت. So in this meaning, Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah said, the market has become corrupted, so stick to what is sufficient. And the marketplaces have become corrupted. Obviously you can extend that now to our capitalist economy. Now we have a global economy, extremely corrupted, based on riba. In this situation where you can't even get away from the traces of this haram, just make intention, oh Allah, you're taking what is just your necessity for yourself, your family, for your normal living, like food, clothing, shelter, transport, which is considered to be daruriyat. And then, inshallah, you have some excuse. وَلَقَدْ بَلَغَنِي عَنْ وَهَبِ مِنَ الْوَرَدِ أنه كان يجوع نفسه يوما ويومين وثلاثة ثم يأخذ رغيفا ويقول اللهم إنك تعلم أني لا أقوى على الإبادة وأخشى الضعف والألم إن لم آكله. It's narrated from Wahab bin al-Warad that he would keep himself hungry for 2 or 3 days before then eating a loaf of bread. And he would say, oh Allah, you know that I am unable to continue my ibadah. And that I am eating this for genuine fear of becoming too weak and severe pain. اللهم إن كان فيه شيء من خبث أو حرام فلا تؤاخذني به. Oh Allah, if there is anything of impurity or haram in this, then please don't make me accountable for it. You see how he was using, obviously that's an extreme example, but how he was using the idea of, something you have to just take out of necessity now. So even if there is doubtfulness or haram in it, you will be excused by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's almost like the pork, eating the pork after 2 or 3 days of being hungry, it will probably become permissible for you to eat the pork. ثم يبل الرغيف في الماء ويأكل. Then he would wet the bread into water and eat it. قلت فهذان الطريقان للطبقة الأولى من أهل الورع فيما نعلم. So the Imam al-Ghazali says, these two ways that he has described are the high positions. The first one was to go up in the mountains, and the second one was the way of Wahab ibn al-Warad. Stay amongst the people, but only eat when extreme necessity, just to sort of stay alive, really. وَأَمَّا مَنْ دُونَهُمْ فَلَهُمْ احْتِيَاطٌ وَبَحَثٌ عَلَى مِقْدَارٍ. So as for those that are not on that level, like most of us, the normal people, but they want to have some degree of wara, then for them, he says, is to be precautious and be careful of what you take to a certain degree, ala miqdar. And for each person, that degree can be different. For each person, that degree may be different, depending on how much their level of wara is. وَلَهُمْ أَيْضًا نَصِيبٌ مِّنَ الْوَرْعِ عَلَى مِقْدَارٍ. So he says, those people who can't go to that extreme level of starving themselves for 3 days before they eat, still they have a level of wara. We still say they have a level of wara. So you see how Imam al-Ghazali is very even-handed in his approach. It's unrealistic to expect everyone to go to that level. So he says, no, people do the best they can, and they have the level of wara depending on how much they are quite careful. وَبِقَدْرِ مَا تَتَعَنَّى تَنَالُ مَا تَتَمَنَّى. To the level of how much you strive or how much you go through difficulties, that is the level of how much you will attain what you want. Wallahu ta'ala la yudhi'u ajra man ahsana amala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not neglect the reward of those who do good actions. And he's brought this directly from an ayah of Quran. وَهُوَ عَلِيمٌ بِمَا يَفْعَلُونَ. Allah knows best what people are doing. فإن قيل فهذا جانب الحرام فأخبرني عن جانب الحلال وما حد الفضول الذي يلزم منه الحبس والحساب وما المقدار الذي إذا أخذه العبد فيكون ذلك أدبا ولا يكون فضولا ولا عليه فيه حبس ولا حساب. So the next question someone may ask, you've explained to us about haram and doubtful, etc. Tell us about the halal. And what is considered to be excessive in taking what is halal? What is considered to be excessive that will lead us to have the hisab, reckoning, and the habas, the imprisonment? Because previously he mentioned that taking excessively from the halal can also lead to imprisonment and reckoning. Or captivity and reckoning. Not necessarily punishment, which is azab. وَمَا الْمِقْدَارُ الَّذِي. So he says, what is, how do we know what's being excessive and what's being, acceptable of taking from the halal? What's adab, what's a good amount to take, and for which we won't end up with reckoning? فاعلم أن أحوال المباح في الجملة ثلاثة أقسام. So he says, look, know that when we're talking about the permissible, or the halal, it comes under 3 categories. Halal, or the permissible, comes under 3 categories. أحدها أن يأخذه العبد مفاخرا مكاثرا مباهيا مرائيا فيكون الأخذ منه فعلا منكرا ويستوجب على ظاهر فعل الحبس والحساب والنوم والتعيير وهو منكر وشر يستوجب على باطن فعله وهو التكاثر والتفاخر عذاب النار وذلك القصد منه معصية وذنب. The first category is when you are taking from the permissible so much excessively and you're doing it in a way of showing off, and you're doing it in a way of trying to accumulate more and more, competing with, say, your neighbors or other people, competing in the dunya, in other words. So you're doing it to get proud and arrogance, and I've got a high status, I've got a Mercedes, I've got a big mansion, I've got all these things. Yeah. If this is the reason for taking that excessive amount of the permissible, because this is talking about permissible things, having a Mercedes or having a mansion, all these things are not from haram. But if it's done with that intention, then this becomes a forbidden act, almost. Munkar, forbidden, or let's say a wrong act. The act itself will lead to in confinement. He will explain later what he means by confinement on the Day of Judgment, so that you have a reckoning for all these things. Yeah, will lead to confinement, reckoning on the Day of Judgment for all of those things that you accumulated, and lawm wa ta'yir, is something that will be blameworthy, and it's something that is considered a aib, like something that is a defect, a great وهو منكر وشر. This is a bad thing, and if it is done for those inward intentions of takathur wa tafakhur, were done with the intention of merely showing off and trying to be better than your neighbors or your other family or your relatives, in this case actually it can lead to punishment in the hellfire as well. And in that case it would become actually a sin. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إنما الحياة الدنيا لعب ولهو وزينة وتفاخر بينكم وتكاثر في الأموال والأولاد كمثل غيث أعجب الكفار نباته ثم يهيج فتراه مصفرا ثم يكون حطاما وفي الآخرة عذاب شديد. So a very powerful ayah of Quran, Surah Al-Hadid, ayah number 20. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the life of this world is nothing but, innama is for hasar, is nothing but. La'ib, playing around. Lahu, entertainment. Wazina, showing off, ornamentation. People wearing nice clothes, ornamentation of our houses, of our clothing, of our transport. وَتَفَاخُرٍ بَيْنَكُمْ تَفَاخُرٌ بَيْنَكُمْ, boasting amongst yourselves. Who's got the bigger car? Who's got the bigger money? Who's got the bigger job? Who's got the bigger salary? One of the brothers was telling me in the workplaces where he works, the first thing anyone ever wants to know about anyone is how much they're worth, meaning how much they earn. What's your annual salary? That's the immediate thing that's how you looked at, Tafakhurun bainakum, boasting amongst each other, who's got the bigger, who's worth the most money. وَتَكَاثُرٌ فِي الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَوْلَادِ. See, these are all in what we call the third form, reciprocal. So these are to do with people competing amongst each other. Takathur, each one trying to get more and more money, more and more sons and daughters, more and more family. I've got more, bigger family than you. I've got more wealth than you. So this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, this life of this world is nothing but these things. And what is it like? كَمَثَلِ غَيْثٍ. It is like a cloud, a rain cloud. أعجب الكفار نباته. When the rain cloud comes and all the plants grow from the earth, the kuffar, they feel amazed, they feel happy. Look at all this growth, look at all these plants, look at everything.
You mean farmers here, I think.
Sorry?
I think it means farmers here.
Kuffar. Oh, maybe, yeah. Is that how they translate it?
I don't know.
Is it translated husbandmen?
Okay, it's farmers, yeah. Oh, that's a good point, Jazakallah khair. Because the kafir is the one also that plants the seeds, you know. So this is from that meaning of it. So, you know, the farmers, they feel pleased with all the growth from the rain cloud. ثم تهيج فتراه مصفرا ثم يكون. But then after a while, after some time has passed, you see that same growth, you know, the green growth is then yellow and dead and becomes, you know, first it becomes yellow and withered, and then finally it just becomes completely dry and just blows away. And so that's the metaphor for all of those things we're trying to get in the Hayat al-Dunya. All of that zina, the embellishments, the wealth, the family, all these things that people are competing amongst. It's like that plant that grows and then soon it's just going to be withered away. But then how does the ayah end? وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ عَذَابٌ شَدِيدٌ. And in the next world is a painful punishment. So that's why Imam al-Ghazali has said that if the accumulation of halal is with these type of intentions of boasting and competing with each other for dunya, then actually it is a sin and can lead to hellfire. Yeah? So that's the extreme state of taking, you know, getting so involved in the dunya and just being engrossed in it. So, you know, it's important to remember these are things that are straight from Quran. You know, that's why we just have to read the Quran to understand this deen. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من طلب الدنيا حلالا مباهيا مكاثرا مفاخرا مرائيا لقي الله تعالى وهو عليه غضبان. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم in this narration said, whoever tries to seek after the dunya, the halal of the dunya, but for the reason of showing off and trying to increase more than others, then he will meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah will be angry with him. So this is really dangerous, you know, thing to fall into. The fine line between taking what Allah has made halal for us, but then going to an excessiveness, just competing with others. You know, because this leads to imbalance as well in society. Because then people are trying to get so much simply for competing with each other, and they forget about the poor people. You know, that wealth needs to be redistributed amongst. You know, you don't need that much. You don't need to have, just because the neighbor's got 5 cars, you have to have 6. You know, that type of when it gets into that type of competitiveness, as we see, you know, around us and in those Gulf Arab countries, where one sheikh builds a massive tower and the other sheikh has to build a bigger tower. You know, his family, you know, that family, that wealthy family, has built the tallest tower in so-and-so city. Now the other family has to build a bigger tower. You're wasting millions and millions and millions. For what reason? Just for this tafakhur. It's just for this simple reason of boasting, to say which one's better, which one's richer, which one has got more prestige. So then that money could have been spent on building orphanages or feeding poor people. You know, you would still have your status and prestige, but why do you have to be trying to be better than the next person? So he said, فَالْوَعِيدُ عَلَى قَصْدِهِ ذَلِكَ بِقَلْبِهِ. So the warning, the punishment is linked to the intention here as well. Someone could be getting a big house or a nice car, but they don't have this type of intention of rivalry and trying to get more than the next person. In which case it may not be something that is sinful for him. Yeah? والقسم الثاني أن يأخذ الحلال لشهوة نفسه لا غير. I don't want to give the impression that this deen forbids those things as well, because we have many instances of great people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, great ulama, having, nice clothing, the finest horses and these type of things are there. Yeah, it's in our tradition as well. Who was it, the Shaykh that was on the really fine horse? And then the non-Muslim approached him. Was it Ibn Hajar? Does anyone remember? Omar, do you remember? Well, I don't think it was actually, but there's one story when one of the big sheikhs, he was riding on a very fine horse, which is nowadays what we would call, say, like a BMW or a Mercedes or something, and wearing fine clothing. And a very poor, I think it was a Jewish man, stopped him, who didn't have much of the dunya, and said to him, he stopped his horse and he said to him, "Oh, Shaykh so-and-so, you say that this world is the prison of the believer and the paradise of the disbeliever. But we'll look at my state and look at your state. What sort of paradise am I in and what sort of prison are you in?" So the Shaykh thought for a moment and then said to him, he said, when I reflected on that, it's apparent to me that compared to the next world, Jannah, this is like a prison for me. And compared to your place in the next world, in the hellfire, this is like a paradise for you. فالقسم الثاني, so the second one is, the second category, remember I said there was 3 categories of taking from the halal, is that he takes from the halal to feed the desires of his nafs. To feed the desire of his nafs, not for other reasons. In other words, he may be taking excessively of food, drink, etc. for his own appetites, not for boasting and those other things that were mentioned before, for trying to, increase your dunyawi, competing with others. It's just for his own shahwa, so he wants to have a nice car. Yeah, but it's just for his own shahwa, not necessarily for the very blameworthy aspect of competing in the dunyawi things. فذلك منه شر يستوجب عليه الحبس والحساب. This is also a bad thing, taking excessively, and this will lead to the habas and the hisab, the confinement or so let's say confinement and the reckoning in the hereafter, but not to the hellfire, as he said for the previous one. So it's one stage less. وَلِقَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى ثُمَّ لَتُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, you will be asked on that day about pleasures. The Prophet ﷺ explained that this is just any pleasures, even if they're halal. So even if you drink a cold water that is considered na'im, you will be asked about it. Yeah? It doesn't mean you'll be punished for it, but you will be asked. It's something you'll be taken to reckoning. وقال صلى الله عليه وسلم حلالها حساب. So this narration was from the Prophet ﷺ, that the halal will lead to reckoning. القسم الثالث أن يأخذ من الحلال في حال الأذر قدرا يستعين به على عبادة الله تعالى ويقتصر على ذلك. And then the third category is the one where he's just confining his taking of the dunya to what he needs for his necessities, the food, drink, shelter and transport, so that he may be able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the way that has been prescribed. فَذَلِكَ مِنْهُ خَيْرٌ وَحَسَنٌ وَأَدَبٌ. And this is the one which is all good. Yeah, there's no bad in that. وَلَا حِسَابَ عَلَيْهِ وَلَا عِقَابٍ. He will not be taken to reckoning for such things, nor will he have any punishment for it. بَلْ يَسْتَوْجِبُ عَلَيْهِ الْأَجْرَ وَالْمَدْحَ. In fact, it will lead to the opposite, which is to have reward and praise. لِقَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ نَصِيبٌ مِمَّا كَسَبُوا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they are the ones who will have a portion of what they have earned. وقال صلى الله عليه وسلم من طلب الدنيا حلالا استعفافا عن المسألة وتعتفا على جاره وسعيا على عياله جاء يوم القيامة ووجهه كقمر ليلة البدر. So in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever seeks the dunya, the halal of it, and avoids begging, and takes care of his neighbor's needs as well, so he's not eating while his neighbor is hungry, and he's seeking to feed his family, he will come on the Day of Judgment and his face will be illuminated like the moon on the full moon, on the night of the full moon. وذلك لما قصد به هذه المقصود المحمودة لله سبحانه وتعالى وهذه فعله. So this is what our deen is about, that seeking rizq, working for one's rizq and for one's feeding oneself and one's family is what this deen is about. It's ibadah. فإن قيل فما شرط المباح حتى يصير خيرا وحسنة كما ذكرتم. If someone said, what is the condition of mubah? What is the prerequisite to make something permissible in the way that you described, so that it's good for us to take from it? فاعلم أنه يحتاج لكونه خيرا في الأصل إلى شرطين أحدهما الحال والثاني القصد. So you have to fulfill two conditions for the thing to be halal and good. Fulfill two conditions. The first one is the state and the other one is the intention. فالحال يجب أن يكون في حال عذر وهو بحيث إن لم يأخذ تؤخذ نفسه. وتفسيره أن يكون حاله إن لم يأخذ ذلك المباح ينقطع بسببه عن فرض أو سنة أو نفل فيكون ذلك أفضل من ترك المباح. فإن ترك مباح الدنيا فإن ترك مباح الدنيا فضيلة. فإذا كان الحال كذلك فهو حال العذر. So how do we fulfill the third category, in which the thing that we take is praiseworthy? It's not something that we'll be taken a reckoning for. So the two conditions. The first is the hal, that you're in a state where you're excused. So that's a state where you need it for your basic nourishment. You need it for your basic nourishment. If you were not to take that halal, then it would lead you to missing fard or sunnah or nafal. So for example, if you weren't going to take that halal food, you'd be so hungry that you wouldn't be able to do your ibadah properly. It might lead you to missing either fard or sunnah or nafal that you would normally do. So not necessarily fard, but even something that was just a nafal that you normally would do. But because of leaving that, then you should take that halal. Most of us have the opposite problem. We take the halal and then we miss the nafal because of overeating. And I put my hand up to be guilty to having that issue as well. This is the opposite. So if you eat, you don't eat it, you'll miss your nafal because you're too hungry. So it says, فَيْكُونُ ذَلِكَ أَفْضَلُ مِنْ تَرْكِ الْمُبَاحِ. In this case, one should eat. So this is what we call, so he says, sometimes leaving what is permissible is also good. So, this state is known as the hal of udhr. This is where you have, if you eat that, you're excused, even if there's some sort of doubtfulness in that. أما القصد فإن يقصد به الإدة والاستعانة على عبادة الله سبحانه فهو أن يذكر بقلبه أنه لولا ما فيه من التوصل إلى عبادة الله تعالى لما أخذ ذلك. The second one is the intention. So he has intention that he's eating or drinking this thing because it will lead him to be able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or to be even more specific, he says if it was not going to lead him to worship Allah, he would not have taken that thing. فهذا ذكر الحجة ولما حصل ذكر الحجة في حال العذر صار ذلك الأخذ من الدنيا الحلال خيرا وحسنا وعدبا. So he calls this ذكر الحجة. This is like, remembering or making this intention that I'm only eating this for doing this ibadah. If I wasn't going to do this ibadah, I wouldn't have eaten or drank this thing. He says once you have that qasad, that intention, and you have that hal, that state that you're in, the two things come together, then the thing that you've taken is going to be something which is good and praiseworthy. وأما لو كان حاله حال العذر ولا يكون له هذا القصد والذكر أو يكون له هذا الذكر ولا يكون في حال العذر فلا يكون ذلك الأخذ من جملة الخيرات. If either one of these two is missing, then you won't fulfill that category of taking something which is praiseworthy. If either of those two is missing. ثم الاستقامة على حفظ هذا الأدب تحتاج إلى بصيرة وقصد مجمل بأنه لا يأخذ من الدنيا بحال لا إلا للعدة على عبادة الله تعالى. This is also very high level. I mean, the sort of time and place we live in is rare to have this type of thing, just eating completely what is just necessary. Apart from people who are on a diet or having eating disorders or things like that, but they're doing it for different intention. They're not doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, they're doing it for a dunyawi thing, for having to improving their own appearance or whatever. Like some of these famous actresses, they have a baby, and then after about 6 weeks it's in the news, wow, can't believe she's so thin again, But, if you were being paid about 10 million for doing a movie, or you're a supermodel who gets paid millions of pounds or dollars for having a few photographs, you would also lose that much weight in a few weeks. So then you have these all poor girls out there who are trying to imitate these people, but they don't get paid tens of millions of dollars. But they're still trying to, so they're getting the eating disorders and mental problems and all these things. So the time and place we live in is, obviously we have to take everything into context. We live in a place where, like, all these foods are just given to us, you go to supermarkets, you see food from all over the world. People in the past lived much more simple lives, if you lived in the time of Imam al-Ghazali, or even if you lived 100 years ago, you generally have a much more simple foods, you eat normal, simple, if you speak to people who, our grandparents who lived in villages or things like that, they just have very simple food, like 3 or 4 different types of food, the bread, rotis, sometimes you sacrifice animal, have meat. You don't have very different varieties at all back in those times. In those times, if you were a prince or a king, then you would probably get fruit from all over. Like Ibn Battuta describes when he went to India, and he describes in his book, about the Sultan of Hind and how they had special systems set up so that fruit from all over the empire would come to him. Special like fast courier services. That would he did a beautiful description of it as well that he gives. But that was for us now, we living like kings used to live in the past. You go to Asda, you see fruits from exotic fruits from all over the world. Even better than they used to live, because now we don't even have to wait for the season. It's there all the time. So for us, it's more our battle of nafs is just to keep ourselves under control. Just don't get into this excessive type of wanting to have refined tastes of different all these things. So what I'm trying to say is, in our time, if someone just doesn't have to be at that level, they can still get to a level of wara by just trying to stick within some limits of halal, being careful about these things and everything. Because the temptations in our times are far, far greater if we live in these wealthy type of societies. Then obviously on the other side of the planet you have those people who are on the complete opposite of poverty, that can't even buy food to eat. So extremely inequalities. Did people see that? There was a film, the BBC did it, I think it was BBC did a film about, they sent 4 people to live amongst the slum in Kenya. Anyone watched that? No one was, it's a good thing to watch. They sent 4 celebrities from this country, and they put them for a couple of weeks or a few days amongst one of the poorest slum in Kenya. And they got them to live with just normal people who live in these slums. Lenny Henry was one of them, and one of them was an actress from EastEnders, and one of them was, I think, Angela Rippon, the old newsreader, and the 4th one was a Radio 1 or Radio 2 DJ, black origin. They sent a very, very good program to watch. They made like put it into 2 parts. Good to show our children as well, because we don't realise that vast majority of people in the world are living in that state. Lenny Henry was living amongst this family of Muslims. They were Muslim, this one. They had the 2 parents and they had the children. And that is just beautiful, the way they had that, still had some dignity as well, They were like frying some food and selling it, and he was helping them on all this. But living in this very, very, like in one room and very horrible conditions. And then the second family he had to live with, he couldn't take it. He dropped out of the program. Because it was a boy who was 16, and he had all these younger brothers and sisters that were like 12, 11, And his parents had died when he was 12. So he had to bring up all of his younger brothers and sisters. And he was working hard, and he was sending them to school as well, the young ones. But he couldn't go to school himself because he had to work, and it was just, really, really very poor condition. They were living in one room with like a sewer, literally a sewer in the room, in one side of the room. And the Lenny Henry sort of broke down. And he said, look, I can't do this. I've got to drop out of the Pro and Armour. And he bought them another house for $2,000. So, we forget that this is like here we're living in such wealth and affluence, and there people are living in total extreme opposite. So this is why, there will be a hisab about this as well. There will be a hisab. Anything we take of excessiveness, we're going to be questioned about this. ثم الاستقامة على حفظ هذا الأدب نحتاج إلى بصيرة وقصد مجمل بأنه لا يأخذ من الدنيا بحال إلا للعدة على عبادة الله تعالى حتى إنه إن صح عن ذكر الحجة في حال أجزأه ذلك القصد المجمل عن تجديد ذكر الحجة. So the Imam al-Ghazali just points out that if we just keep a general intention, that whatever we are taking from the halal is for our basic nourishment and to keep us upon the path of ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we always have that general intention, we don't have to then make it every single time. That just becomes then that is our path in life. Becomes our path. You make a decision that you are going to be someone who is trying to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then whatever you're doing all the time is all geared towards that one goal. Then you don't have to specifically have that intention every time you eat something or drink something, because it's always there. It's taken that is your whole purpose and your whole path in life. قال شيخنا رحمه الله فصارت الأمور الثلاثة معتبرة فيه كل واحد من وجه. So he says our Shaykh has mentioned then, so this becomes three elements to this whole thing, just to summarize. يعني أن الذكر والحال معتبرات لحصول كونه خيرا أصلا. So you have to have, as you mentioned before, being in that state of needing that nourishment for ibadah and having the intention. والقصد والمجمل المقتدي عن بصيرة منزلة الأدب معتبر في الاستقامة عليه فافهم ذلك راشدا. So in exchange for that particular intention, you could have that general intention that all the time, everything you're taking is for that purpose. فإن قيل فإن أخذ الدنيا الحلال لشهوة فهل يكون ذلك معصية؟ فإن أخذ الدنيا الحلال لشهوة فهل يكون ذلك معصية؟ وهل يلزم عليه عذاب؟ فهل الأخذ بالعذر فرض أم لا؟ Just a final point, he says, related to that, if people were to ask, look, you said, that you should only take what is necessary for your basic nourishment, for ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what if someone takes more from what is permissible? Is this actually something that will be sinful and lead him into punishment? So are you saying it's actually obligatory to just restrict ourselves to just what we need to nourish our bodies? Or can we take more if we want to? Can we eat more if we want to? Can we take more of the pleasures of the world if we want to, as long as they're halal? فاعلم أن ذلك فضيلة نسميها خيرا وحسنا والأمر به أمر تأديب والأخذ بالشهوة أخذ شر وسيئة ونهي عنه نهي زجر ليس ذلك بمعصية ولا يكون عليه عذاب النار وإنما عليه الحبس والحساب واللوم والتعيير. Hopefully, I mean, this is sort of in a way reiterating what he's already explained. That no, if you take more of the halal than you need to, he says it's not necessarily going to be something that is going to lead to ma'asiyah. It's not sinful, it's not disobedience, but it is something which is shar and sayyah. It's something which is bad, but not necessarily sinful in the sense of that you will get a prescribed punishment for it. But it's something bad, blameworthy, and it's something for which you will have a reckoning. You have a reckoning. Wallahum wa ta'yir. People are on their different levels. I mean, normal people like us are not going to have the reckoning that these millionaires and billionaires are going to have. People who have got billions and billions of dollars, that with a fraction of their personal wealth, they could feed all the hungry people in the world. With a fraction of their personal wealth. So that's just a reality. We don't understand the sort of sums that are involved. With a fraction of the personal wealth of King Abdullah or Bill Gates, they could lay off all the debt of the third world. And that's not even all of their wealth, that's a fraction of it. These are the type of inequalities that we have. So those people will be reckoned, severely reckoned, of what they did with their billions. And don't fall for these things you see in the news about Bill Gates and these guys having these charitable foundations and putting billions. Well, they had this big publicity recently. There were all these billionaires were putting half of their wealth into these charitable foundations. Look into that before you fall into that propaganda. Because, obviously, first of all, there's tax reasons for putting money into charity. And secondly, those charitable foundations, what are they doing in the third world countries? A lot of that money is going into what they call family planning. In other words, they're trying to persuade people in poorer countries don't have so many kids. And things of that nature. This is one of the things that they fear for a long time. Much has been written about it, about how the population is growing in amongst poorer countries, And so the powerful nations of the West, their populations are stagnant, or in some countries even decreasing. They're not even maintaining their population to the next generation because of not having children, etc. So they're doing calculations in the third world, in the place like Bangladesh and Pakistan, these places, population is increasing exponentially, from generation to the next. So they're doing calculations in 50 years' time, how many of us will be there and how many of them. There will be sheer numbers. These will become so difficult for us to maintain our position of power, and dominance. So for several decades they have recognized this, and there's all sorts of things. These so many billions are put into what they call family planning. Give it to those poor countries. Tell them you don't have enough resources. Why are you having so many kids? You need to use contraception and all these things. They managed to have this put through in China. So in China, for as you know, for several generations they had this policy: you're only allowed to have one child per couple. Because population can very quickly grow.
That's why they didn't allow Turkey to join the EU.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised because the population of Turkey is so huge compared to the rest of Europe, and plus it will be increasing, in each generation. So within a few generations, probably there will be more Muslims in Europe than if Turkey was allowed to join, you know.
But how does the quantity actually matter in terms of the real strength?
I think it does
You
matter,
could
yeah.
have
It's become more and more hard to control, you know, if you have increasing numbers of people. It does come into the equation, you know. I think what worries them even more is the Muslims or the Eastern people that have come into their own Western countries now and have communities here, and looking at those population trends as well, you know. Leicester has already become the first city in this country to become majority ethnic.
But if we are worried about our quantity, we should be worried about our quality.
True. Any other questions or comments?
Just one. I don't think it's related to what we. But it's related to the subject we mentioned about these celebrities going over to Kenya.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that this young boy who was 20 years old, and he sacrificed his own.
I think it was about 16.
16. He sacrificed his own.
Yeah.
Comfort, education, everything for the sake of his younger brothers, that he wanted to give them a better education. Going back to your profession, what is the reason behind that? Is that a basic instinct? And if that is a basic instinct, why is it not here in UK?
Because it's a really good question, you know, because I mean, sociologists talk about this this phenomenon of socially based societies and individualistic or individualism, individual based. So the Western countries have gone towards that very severe individualism, you know? Whereas a lot of the other parts of the world are still very social based. Just trying to remember the exact term they use. I can't remember now, but so it's sorry. Yeah, nuclear families. Yeah. So it's a whole different outlook on life itself, and also us second generation don't realize how westernized we've become.
100%.
I didn't realize myself until quite recently when I started rethinking about this and read some articles about this. How in Eastern countries that's key to understanding why things are so different. And there was one article I read by a Muslim scholar saying that Islam is essentially a sort of is a social that it sees man as a relational creature. You know, the human being is a relational creature, meaning our whole life is defined by our relations, even in Islam, and we see this very clearly. You know, the extremely strong obligation of obedience to parents, and a very severe warning of disobedience to parents is one of the highest, greatest sins. And then next about relatives, you know, silatul rahim, breaking ties to our blood relatives is one of the severe sins. You know, so that's the human being, and then the obligations of Sharia as well on the human being. The man, he has to take the welfare of his wife, his children, and then also his relatives, his blood relatives. If there's any that are poor, that cannot afford their own food, clothing, and shelter, it's obligatory upon that person to provide for them. Whether it's your uncle, your cousin, your nephew, your parents, it's obligatory, you know. If you have excess wealth and they don't, you have to give it to them. It can be taken off you by the qadi, literally. You know, it's not an optional thing. So this means, in other words, you know, a human being he is a son, he's a parent, he's a husband, he's a cousin, he's an uncle. This is what defines you as a human being. Whereas in Western culture, and this is what we've grown up in, and we don't realize the effects of it sometimes, is none of that. You are an individual. You are an individual. You know? Everything is just, you must take care of your own needs and desires only. And those other relationships are very much something secondary, you know. And when I understood this, that's when I understood why I've seen certain of my cousins from Pakistan, even our generation, And one of my cousins, they get married to people that their parents have told them to marry, and they never even met the person. Even today, I've seen it happen. And for me, it was really shocking. I couldn't really understand how someone could do that. How can someone marry a girl that his father's told him to marry? Obviously, he's probably seen her and spoken to her, but he hasn't. It's not necessarily his choice, or he's not going to say, "No, Dad, sorry, that's not my choice. I'd rather marry someone else." This is not going to happen. So for me, I couldn't understand that. But then, when you realise how different we've been brought up, we're so individualistic. We can't. For us, that would be difficult, And Western society have just taken to such an extreme now that, like Temur was saying about the nuclear families, now even nuclear families have finished. So the nuclear family was the parents and the children. They had got rid of the extended family some time back, but now the latest thing is now then the nuclear family is also breaking down. So that's why amongst the especially the indigenous culture here, there's nothing, parents. There's no connection between parents to children. It's seen as a very formal connection. You bring up your children, then they do their own thing, and they're not going to bother about you, and you're not going to bother about them.
The basic instinct is changing now.
It has changed, in the West, and the East is always following the West.
Yeah.
I mean, some people say this is a byproduct of urbanization as well. The fact that people come and live in cities and things, maybe part of that is the cause of it. But one of the things sociologists also mention is that where you have poverty or extreme hardship like war, people tend to revert back to those family ties more as well, So those places where you go that are either war-torn societies or extreme poverty, you'll find they're much more based on the family, extended families and kinship, because that becomes important. Because other things have broken down, things are not working. That's the only sort of system that stays in place. People rely upon that then much more,
So it becomes your need to be.
So it's
part
partly
of
to
the
do with the
community.
affluence as well.
That's right. And now we got here in the society where there is no need for individuals to depend on another individual. Therefore, you just do whatever we want to
and
do.
people can't tolerate, relatives.
That's right.
They can't tolerate any type of discomfort
That's
because
right.
they want completely to just feed the individual desires. I don't want my cousin to come around or my uncle, or I don't want to see them. They're gonna, it's a bit uncomfortable for me. So it's partly to do with the affluence as well and things like that. But we need to really think, deeply about how, as a communities in these countries, we are going to try to avoid that trend as well. How are we going to? Because it is to some extent, it is already happening. Or it has happened to a large degree. How can we, get the best of both, so to speak, or try to find what is the correct balance that Islam has given us, of not neglecting these type of things as well. It's a major challenge.
But now, even in this society, the family ties and together, which they have lost. Now, either because of the social or the financial pressures, the West, even in England, they are realizing there should be family ties, like looking after the parents and things like that. They are stressing now that it should be not the responsibility, but they should take care. Maybe it is because of the cost, they have to
Cost,
pay.
exactly, yes, economic reasons.
Exactly. And as far as my study or my conception about our society back at home is, it is not so much they are following the religion, it is more that they have been brought up socially in that way that they have to accept the responsibility, as you said, 16 years or 12 years old. And I have seen many families that the elder has suffered and he has educated the other people, or getting married to their sisters or relatives, it is their responsibility. So this exists, which is, slowly with the urbanization it is going away, but still it is practiced there.
Still, yeah, you do definitely see it.
Sacrifice. As far as the marriage is concerned, you are quite correct. In this society, you cannot dream to get married without seeing the girl. Though still there are people here that the parents, they are getting married without being girls seen. But there the reason is we were brought in this way that we accept what has been proposed by the parents. And to have a love marriage or things like that used to be about 30 years ago as a scar on that family. It was a real scar. Everybody will describe, oh my God. And I remember during my days in the medical school, some of the students, they used to go near the girls' common room. It used to be separate. And one or two.
I don't know if you want to hear the story.
The conception, one or two, they were standing all the time talking to the girl. So one of the person, do you know what he did? He brought a chair and put the chair there. That you are taking so long, you sit on that. Be comfortable. So these things, it doesn't exist now, but 30 years ago, these things were as a scar. So as you say, it is changing. Whether it is for good or not. I think we have to learn some of the things from this society. Like our conception of the Baitul Mal, and they have got this social security. And as you were describing, there used to be a professor of hygiene in Liverpool, Professor Fundal, I'm talking about 70. And he used to describe in the lectures that in the third world, a boy or the family is a social security. And that is true.
Yes, definitely.
That is true.
And that's what I was saying about Islam as well. Sharia is very much, social security is the family. And only where someone has got no relatives, then they will get from Baitul Mal. Which I think there's a lot of hikmah, if you think about it. It really makes, then the family gets the responsibility as well. If you have a relative who is poor, they will then try their best to get him into employment or help him in some way. You see what I mean? So it puts a responsibility on there as well about the family. And this is why the inheritance law is very important as well. Because the way the inheritance law is done, you keep the blood ties. Because you can't choose that I will give all the money to one of my children or this. It has to go amongst all of them.
Thank you.
Jazallahu anna Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ahlu. Jazallahu anna Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ahlu. Jazallahu anna Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ahlu. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. See, Tamur,